The crystal ship drifted through space like a floating jewel. Ambassador Zethkara stood at the main viewing port and watched the blue planet grow larger. Earth looked peaceful from this distance. The swirling white clouds and deep blue oceans reminded him of his own homeworld. But Zethkara knew better than to trust appearances. His people had been watching this planet for many years now. The humans were different from other species the Galactic Concord had found. Most new civilizations were either too afraid to fight or too primitive to matter. The humans seemed to be neither. They had split the atom and reached their moon in less than 100 years. Their radio signals filled space with noise and chatter. They built weapons that could destroy their own world and somehow managed not to use them. Zethkara's second in command was a creature called Klikathara. She belonged to a hive mind species that thought with one voice across billions of bodies. Klikathara moved her forearms in complex patterns as she spoke. The humans confused her greatly. They acted as individuals but somehow worked together when they needed to. This made no sense to someone who had never known what it meant to be. Alone, the bridge of the harmony of spheres was filled with beings from 12 different worlds. They all served the Concord in their own way. Some were builders who created cities that floated in gas clouds. Others were singers whose voices could heal damaged minds. A few were warriors, but only the gentle kind who protected rather than attacked. War had been almost unknown in Concord space for 3,000 years. Dr. Alan Cooper sat in his small office on Earth and stared at the radio signals coming from space. The patterns were unlike anything he had ever seen. The aliens were using mathematics as language, but in ways that hurt his head to think about. Numbers folded back on themselves and created meaning from pure logic. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Cooper had been working on alien contact protocols for most of his adult life. He never really believed he would need them. The universe seemed too big and empty for anyone to find Earth by accident. But the signals were real and getting stronger every day. Someone was coming to visit, and they knew exactly where to look. President Helen Martinez read the report for the third time. The military advisors sat around the table and waited for her decision. General Paul Jenkins looked calm, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. Admiral Lisa Hayes tapped her fingers against the table in a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. Everyone knew this moment would change everything. The aliens wanted to meet in space near Jupiter. They said they came in peace and wanted to welcome Earth into something called the Galactic Concord. The message sounded friendly enough, but Martinez had learned to be careful of friendly offers that came with no choice. She had risen to power by understanding that the most dangerous enemies often smiled. While they spoke, Captain Jake Morrison checked his equipment one more time. The USS Endeavour was humanity's best exploration ship, but it felt very small compared to what was waiting for them. Morrison had fought in 3 wars and commanded ships through asteroid fields and solar storms. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. The crew of the Endeavour was handpicked for this mission. Each person represented the best of what humanity could offer. They were scientists and soldiers and diplomats rolled into one. Morrison looked at their faces and saw the same mixture of excitement and fear that he felt in his own chest. The alien ship appeared on their screens when they were still millions of miles away. It was impossibly large and made of what looked like living crystal. Light moved through its structure in patterns that seemed almost like breathing. The Endeavour could have fit inside one of its smaller sections with room to spare. Zethkara watched the human ship approach and felt surprise wash over him. He had expected something crude and primitive. Instead, he saw a vessel that moved with purpose and precision. The humans had not built the biggest ship or the prettiest ship, but they had built something that worked. This small detail made him more nervous than he wanted to admit. The first meeting took place in a docking bay that the aliens had prepared specially for the occasion. Gravity generators created an Earth-normal environment while air scrubbers provided oxygen that humans could breathe. The Concord had done this many times before with many different species. They knew how to make visitors comfortable. Morrison stepped through the airlock and found himself in a room that looked like it grew from a dream. The walls curved in impossible ways and light came from everywhere and nowhere. Zethkara waited, in the center of the space. He was tall and thin with skin that seemed to be made of flowing water. When he moved, the light moved with him. The ambassador spoke in perfect English that came from small devices floating in the air around his head. His voice was warm and friendly, like someone greeting an old friend. He welcomed Morrison to the greater galaxy and spoke of wonders beyond human imagination. Worlds where it rained diamonds and stars that sang in harmony across the void. Morrison listened politely, but his training kept him focused on details that mattered more than poetry. How many ships did the Concorde have? How far did their territory extend? What did they want from Earth in return for their friendship? The answers came wrapped in diplomatic language, but Morrison understood the meaning underneath. The Concorde offered protection and guidance to younger species. They shared technology and knowledge freely. They helped settle disputes and prevented wars. All they asked in return was trust and cooperation. It sounded almost too good to be true because it was. Morrison asked about Earth's defensive capabilities and saw something flicker in the ambassador's large eyes. The question seemed to amuse Zethkara in a way that made Morrison's hand move instinctively toward his sidearm. The alien explained gently that Earth would not need defenses under Concorde protection. No one had threatened a Concorde world in living memory. The conversation continued for hours, but both sides were really saying the same thing in different ways. The aliens offered safety in exchange for freedom. The humans were not ready to make that trade. Morrison kept his voice calm and professional, but inside, he was already planning for war. When the meeting ended, both sides were polite and friendly. Schedules were made for future talks and gifts were exchanged. Morrison received a small crystal that contained the history of the Concorde. Zethkara was given a simple metal pin that showed the Earth and Moon together. Neither gift revealed anything important, but both sides pretended to be pleased. Morrison returned to the endeavor with a heavy heart. He had hoped the first contact would go differently, but hope and reality were often strangers. The aliens seemed nice enough, but nice people could be just as dangerous as mean ones. When they thought they knew what was best for you, the report he sent back to Earth was short and clear. The aliens were powerful and peaceful and absolutely convinced that they were right about everything. They had never met serious resistance because they had never needed to. That was about to change. Klikathara studied the human data with growing confusion. Her hive mind had processed information from 1,000 different species, but these creatures made no logical sense. They fought wars with each other while exploring space together. They created art about peace while building weapons of war. Every pattern she tried to apply to them broke down within minutes, the insectoid being shared her findings with the other Concorde representatives. According to her analysis, humans showed all the classic signs of a Type 7 aggressive expansionist species. They would spread across the galaxy like a virus if left unchecked. But they also showed signs of wisdom and restraint that confused her. Mathematical models? Zethkara listened to the reports with growing unease. Something about Captain Morrison bothered him in ways he could not name. The human had shown no fear during their meeting. More troubling was the complete absence of awe that other species always displayed when first seeing Concorde technology. Morrison had looked at their greatest achievements like a mechanic examining an engine. Back on Earth, Admiral Hayes worked through the night analyzing every detail of the alien technology they had observed. Her team of engineers and scientists filled 3 rooms with calculations and theories. What they found was both encouraging and terrifying. The alien ships were incredibly advanced, but they followed predictable patterns. Hayes had spent her career preparing for threats that might never come. She had studied every human conflict in history, looking for lessons that might apply to space warfare. The aliens clearly had better technology, but technology alone did not win wars. Determination and adaptability often mattered more than superior firepower. The second meeting was scheduled for the following week. This time, the aliens wanted to present their standard integration treaty. Dr. Cooper had been working day and night to translate the document, but many concepts had no human equivalent. Words like protective guidance and beneficial oversight seemed designed to hide their true meaning. President Martinez called an emergency session of the Security Council. The treaty was spread across the table like a map of surrender. Every clause gave the aliens more control over human affairs. They would manage Earth's space program and regulate human expansion beyond the solar system. They would monitor human weapons development and ensure that dangerous technologies were never created. The aliens presented this as a gift of wisdom from older and wiser civilizations. They had seen what happened when primitive species were allowed to develop without guidance. Wars destroyed entire star systems and civilizations collapsed under the weight of their own violence. The Concord existed to prevent such tragedies. General Jenkins read through the military sections with growing anger. Humans would be allowed to keep basic defensive forces, but nothing that could threaten Concord ships. No weapons of mass destruction, and no long-range missiles. Earth would become a protectorate in everything but name. Morrison attended the second meeting with a full diplomatic team. The aliens had prepared an elaborate ceremony to mark humanity's entry into galactic civilization. Thousands of beings from dozens of worlds watched via quantum communication links. They expected to witness another peaceful integration into the Concord family. The ceremony began with music that sounded like starlight given voice. Representatives from each member species spoke about the benefits of Concord membership. They talked about shared knowledge and peaceful cooperation. They promised that humans would never need to fear war or want for anything when the time came to sign the treaty. Morrison stood up and spoke clearly into the sudden silence. Earth appreciated the Concord's generous offer but could not accept the terms as written. Humans valued their independence too highly to trade it for safety. The reaction was immediate and telling. None of the alien representatives seemed surprised by the refusal. They had clearly expected this response and prepared for it. Zethkara spoke sadly about the difficulty of helping younger species understand what was best for them. Klikathara provided statistical data about other species who had initially refused Concord protection. All of them eventually came to see the wisdom of cooperation. Some took longer than others, but the end result was always the same. The galaxy was too dangerous for any species to face alone. Morrison asked what would happen if Earth continued to refuse their protection. The question hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Zethkara explained gently that the Concord could not allow dangerous species to threaten galactic peace. They would do whatever was necessary to ensure stability. The threat was delivered with smiles and reassuring words, but Morrison understood perfectly. Submit or be conquered. The aliens had probably never needed to make good on such threats because few species were foolish enough to resist. Humans were about to prove that few and none were very different things. Dr. Cooper intercepted alien communications during the following days. His translation programs were getting better at understanding their mathematical language. What he learned made his blood run cold. The aliens were not debating whether to attack Earth, but only how much force would be necessary. The Concord had called in a battle fleet to deal with the human problem. 12 ships carrying enough firepower to sterilize a planet. They considered this massive overkill for a single system species, but wanted to be absolutely certain of quick victory. The fleet was already moving toward the outer edge of the solar system. Hayes received Cooper's intelligence report and felt her heart rate increase. 12 alien warships against whatever Earth could put into space. On paper it looked like suicide, but Hayes had not become an admiral by accepting impossible odds. She activated protocols that had been secret for 20 years, hidden shipyards. Throughout the solar system came alive with activity. Asteroid mining stations revealed their true purpose as weapons manufacturing facilities. Moon bases that officially studied geology began producing ammunition for guns that did not officially exist. Mars colonies started assembling ship components that had been disguised as industrial equipment. The secret went back to the first radio signals from space. A small group of military planners had convinced world leaders that humanity needed to prepare for the worst possible scenario. While diplomats planned for peaceful contact, soldiers prepared for war. Morrison returned to Earth to find a world transformed. The secret was out and humanity was revealing its true nature. Ships that had been hidden in asteroid fields powered up their engines. Weapons that existed only in classified blueprints began moving toward assembly points. Captain Rachel Stone emerged from the shadows to take command of the defense fleet. She had spent 15 years studying theoretical alien combat scenarios. Her plans assumed that any hostile aliens would have better technology but might lack experience fighting determined opponents. The USS Defiance took shape in Earth orbit, like a metal mountain growing from nothing. It was ugly and brutal and designed for one purpose only. Every system had backups and every backup had backups. It could take incredible damage and keep fighting. Commander Rick Turner ran combat simulations, day and night. His scenarios all showed human ships losing in direct confrontation with alien technology. But Turner had studied human military history and knew that wars were rarely won by the side with better equipment. They were won by the side that refused to quit. The alien fleet took position beyond Pluto and sent one final message to Earth: surrender now and face only minimal punishment. Continue to resist and face complete destruction. The choice belonged to humanity, but the Concorde's patience was not unlimited. President Martinez assembled every world leader for a final vote. The choice was simple, but the consequences were enormous. Submit to alien rule or fight a war that humanity might not survive. The debate lasted 6 hours, but the vote was unanimous. Earth's response went out on every frequency that could reach space. The message was simple and came from Morrison himself. Humanity declined the Concorde's protection and would take their chances with freedom. They thanked the aliens for their generous offer, but some gifts came at too high a price. The alien fleet began moving inward toward Earth as soon as the message was received. War had come to the solar system, and both sides knew that only one would survive it. War singer Morduk commanded the Concorde battle fleet from his flagship named Eternal Harmony. The reptilian warrior had crushed 17 rebellions during his long career. He expected the humans to surrender as soon as they saw his ships, but was prepared to destroy them if necessary. In his experience, fear worked better than force, but sometimes force was the only language primitives understood. The battle fleet consisted of 12 vessels, each capable of destroying a planet. Their plasma cannons could boil oceans, and their particle beams could crack continents. Morduk had never needed more than 3 ships for any previous operation, but Concorde wanted this rebellion ended quickly and permanently. His tactical officer was a being made of living crystal named Shardthick. The creature processed battle data faster than most computers and had never lost a strategic engagement. Shardthick analyzed human military capabilities and concluded that resistance would last no more than 6 hours. Probably much less once the humans saw what they faced. Captain Stone stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance and watched the alien fleet approach on long-range sensors. 12 ships against 7 did not seem like good odds, but Stone had not survived 3 wars by accepting what seemed obvious. She had studied every piece of data about Concorde, military doctrine, and found weaknesses that might be exploited. The human defense fleet looked nothing like the elegant alien vessels. Each ship was built like a fortress with layers of armor and redundant systems. They carried kinetic weapons that fired solid projectiles instead of energy beams. Stone believed that sometimes the old ways worked better than the new ones. Commander Turner ran final weapons checks on every human ship. His tactical doctrine was simple but brutal. Get close enough that superior alien technology mattered less than human determination. Accept heavy damage in exchange for the chance to inflict critical hits. Fight until the ships broke apart and then keep fighting. General Jenkins coordinated the defense from his command center deep under the mountains of Colorado. Every human military satellite was tracking the alien advance. Hidden weapons platforms throughout the solar system waited for targeting orders. If the fleet failed, then Earth would make the aliens pay for every mile of space. Dr. Cooper monitored alien communications from his listening post in Antarctica. The mathematical language was becoming clearer to him as stress made the aliens less careful about encryption. What he heard made him smile grimly. The Concord commanders were arguing about how much force to use against the primitive humans. Zethkara had returned to Concord space to report on the failed negotiations. He felt genuine sadness about the coming battle, but could not understand human stubbornness. Every species eventually accepted Concord protection because the alternative was extinction. The humans seemed determined to choose extinction rather than admit they were wrong. The first phase of battle began when Mordek ordered a demonstration of Concord power. His ships targeted several large asteroids and reduced them to glowing vapor with precise plasma strikes. The display was meant to show humans what would happen to Earth if they continued to resist. Stone watched the demonstration and felt her anger grow cold and focused. The aliens were trying to intimidate humanity by destroying rocks. They clearly had no idea what they were dealing with. She opened communications to the entire human fleet and spoke words that would be remembered for centuries. The USS Defiance and 6 companion vessels dropped out of hyperspace directly in the middle of the Concord formation. The maneuver was impossible according to alien tactical doctrine, but humans had never read their rules. Stone's voice carried across every frequency as she gave the aliens 30 seconds to withdraw from the solar system. Mordek could not believe what his sensors were telling him. 7 primitive ships had somehow appeared inside his defensive perimeter without triggering any alarms. The humans were either incredibly lucky or far more advanced than intelligence reports suggested. He decided not to find out which. The order to open fire came from 12 Concord ships simultaneously. Plasma beams and particle cannons focused on the human vessels with enough energy to destroy a small moon. Alien gunners expected to see the primitive ships vaporize instantly. Instead, they watched human shields flicker and hold against the assault. Stone felt the Defiance shake under alien fire, but the ship held together. Human engineers had built their vessels to absorb punishment rather than avoid it. She waited until the alien weapons reached peak intensity and then gave the order that changed galactic history. All human ships opened fire with their kinetic bombardment systems. Tungsten rods accelerated to incredible velocities, struck Concord ships like the fist of an angry god. The projectiles punched through alien shields as if they were made of paper. Energy barriers designed to stop plasma beams and particle cannons were useless against solid matter moving at relativistic speeds. Shardthick watched his tactical displays dissolve into chaos as human weapons tore through Concord defenses. The crystal being had calculated thousands of battle scenarios, but none had included kinetic weapons delivered at such velocities. The humans were fighting like barbarians, but barbarians who understood physics better than most civilized species. The first Concord ship to die was the light cruiser Gentle Peace. Kinetic rounds ripped through its hull and destroyed every major system in seconds. The elegant vessel that had served for 3 centuries became a cloud of debris drifting through space. Its crew never had time to understand what killed them. Turner coordinated the human attack with savage precision. His ships moved in patterns that made no sense to alien tactical computers. They accepted damage that should have crippled them and continued fighting with systems that should not have worked. Human redundancy turned out to be more valuable than alien efficiency. The battle reached its turning point when Stone ordered the Defiance to ram the alien flagship. The maneuver was suicide according to every military manual ever written, but humans had always been willing to die for the right cause. The massive collision crippled both vessels, but the humans kept fighting even as their ship broke apart around them. Mordek found himself trapped in the wreckage of his command center as human kinetic rounds continued to tear his ship apart. The war singer, who had never known defeat, watched his fleet crumble against an enemy that fought like nothing in his experience. He sent a desperate message to Concord High Command requesting immediate reinforcements. The human ships were dying, but they were taking alien vessels with them. Each Concord loss represented centuries of peaceful development destroyed in minutes. Each human loss represented a species willing to die rather than live as slaves. The mathematics of the battle favored neither side. Stone dragged herself through the shattered corridors of the Defiance as the ship continued to break apart. Emergency lighting cast red shadows on twisted metal and floating debris. She could hear the sounds of her crew still fighting at their stations, even as vacuum claimed sections of the hull. The final phase of battle lasted only minutes, but changed the course of galactic history. Human ships that should have been destroyed hours ago delivered killing blows to alien vessels that had seemed invincible. The last Concorde ship limped away from the battle, carrying news that would shake the foundations of their civilization. Hayes received the battle reports in her command center and felt pride mixed with grief. The human fleet had won, but at a cost that made victory taste like ashes. 7 ships and 3,000 crew members had died to prove that humanity would not bow to alien masters. The aftermath was worse than the battle itself. Rescue ships searched through debris fields looking for survivors. Emergency medical teams worked frantically to save crew members who had been exposed to vacuum or radiation. The price of freedom was higher than anyone had imagined. Stone was found unconscious in an escape pod 3 days after the battle ended. She had stayed at her post until the Defiance finally broke apart and then helped evacuate the remaining crew. When she woke up in a hospital bed, the first thing she asked was whether the aliens were coming back. The answer came from deep space monitoring stations. More Concorde ships were moving toward the solar system, but they were coming slowly and carefully. The easy victory Mordok had promised was now impossible. Humanity had proven that they could fight and win against superior technology. The news of the battle spread through Concorde space like a virus. For the first time in 3,000 years, member species began to question whether protection was worth the price. Some worlds that had never considered rebellion started asking dangerous questions about freedom and independence. President Martinez addressed the world from the ruins of the Space Defense Center. Earth had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. Humanity would rebuild and prepare for the next assault. They had proven that free people could not be conquered by those who had forgotten how to fight. The Concorde Council met in emergency session on Unity Prime for the first time in 800 years. The great amphitheater that had witnessed countless peaceful negotiations now echoed with angry voices and confused questions. Representatives from 12 species struggled to understand how their invincible fleet had been defeated by a single-system civilization. Zethkara stood before the assembly and tried to explain what had happened at Earth. The aquatic being's normally calm demeanor was shattered by the loss of so many ships and lives. He described humans as unlike any species the Concorde had encountered. They fought with a combination of primitive brutality and advanced science that defied classification. Klikathara presented her analysis of human military doctrine to the stunned council. Her hive mind had processed every detail of the battle and reached disturbing conclusions. Humans did not fight to win in the traditional sense. They fought to inflict maximum damage, even if it meant their own destruction. This made them nearly impossible to defeat through intimidation. The reptilian, war singer Mordok, was carried into the chamber on a medical transport. His body was broken, but his mind remained sharp enough to deliver the worst news of all. The humans had not used their most advanced weapons during the battle. Intelligence suggested they possessed nuclear arsenals and kinetic bombardment platforms that could threaten entire fleets. Admiral Hayes walked through the rebuilt defense facilities on Luna and marveled at how quickly humanity had recovered from the battle. New ships were already taking shape in the orbital yards while weapons factories worked around the clock. The loss of the First Fleet had only made Earth more determined to resist. Captain Stone commanded the new flagship USS Retribution from her wheelchair. The injuries from the battle had left her partially paralyzed, but her mind remained as sharp as ever. She studied intelligence reports about Concorde reinforcements and planned defenses that would make the aliens pay an even higher price for their next attack. The second wave of Concorde ships was 3 times larger than the first, but moved with obvious caution. Mordecai's replacement was a cautious strategist named Veltar who believed in overwhelming force applied carefully. He brought 36 vessels, including the mighty dreadnought Infinite Wisdom. Dr. Cooper had broken the alien communication codes completely and now listened to every Concorde transmission. The conversations revealed deep divisions within their military command. Some wanted to glass Earth from a safe distance, while others argued for negotiation. Fear was spreading through their ranks like a disease. Turner prepared the defense fleet for a battle that would decide humanity's fate. The new ships incorporated lessons learned from the first engagement. Thicker armor and more powerful kinetic weapons made them deadlier than ever. The 36 alien ships still represented odds that would challenge any human force. President Martinez addressed the United Nations for what might be the last time. The alien fleet would arrive within days, and humanity faced a choice between surrender and extinction. Every nation on Earth had voted to continue fighting, but the cost would be measured in billions of lives. The Concorde fleet stopped at the edge of the solar system and sent a final ultimatum to Earth: surrender immediately and face only occupation. Continue to resist and watch your world burn. Veltar believed that fear would accomplish what force had failed to achieve. He was about to learn how wrong he could be. Humanity's response came not in words but in actions. Hidden weapons platforms throughout the solar system activated simultaneously and began bombarding the alien fleet with kinetic projectiles. The attack came from every direction at once and caught the Concorde formation completely off guard. Veltar watched his tactical display fill with incoming projectiles and realized that humans had turned their entire solar system into a weapon. Asteroid mining stations revealed themselves as railgun platforms, while moon bases launched missiles that had been disguised as mining equipment. Earth itself bristled with launch tubes that could reach any point in local space. The battle that followed dwarfed the previous engagement in both scale and brutality. Human kinetic weapons struck alien ships from impossible angles, while Concorde PLA-SMA cannons boiled asteroids and vaporized satellites. Both sides fought with desperate fury, knowing that defeat meant extinction. Stone led the human fleet in a series of hit-and-run attacks that confused alien tactical computers. Her ships appeared from behind moons and asteroids to deliver devastating strikes before disappearing again. The aliens had superior firepower, but humans had home field advantage and the will to use it. The turning point came when human engineers activated their most secret weapon. A network of fusion bombs hidden throughout the asteroid belt detonated simultaneously and created a wall of nuclear fire that stretched across millions of miles. Alien ships caught in the explosion were vaporized instantly, while others found their sensors blinded by electromagnetic interference. Veltar tried to retreat, but discovered that humans had mined every escape route with nuclear devices. His fleet was trapped in a solar system that had become a death trap. The primitives had turned their home into a fortress that could destroy any attacking force. Military doctrine said such defenses were impossible, but human stubbornness made the impossible routine. The final phase of battle was more massacre than combat. Human ships emerged from hiding places throughout the solar system and attacked the confused alien fleet from every direction. Concorde vessels that had seemed invincible burned like candles in the vacuum. Crews that had never known defeat died without understanding how they had been beaten. Only 12 alien ships escaped the solar system, and half of those were badly damaged. Veltar's mighty dreadnought limped away with most of its weapons destroyed, and its hull cracked from bow to stern. The Concorde's second attempt to conquer Earth had failed even more completely than the first. The aftermath of the second battle sent shockwaves throughout Concorde space that reached far beyond military circles. Member species that had never questioned their protection began asking dangerous questions about the price of peace. Worlds that had accepted alien oversight for centuries started demanding more autonomy. Hayes reviewed the battle reports and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Earth had won 2 decisive victories against impossible odds, but the cost was becoming unbearable. Every human ship was damaged and thousands more crew members were dead or wounded. The next battle might be one too many. Stone was promoted to Fleet Admiral. Despite her injuries and given command of all human space forces, she accepted the honor knowing that it might be a death sentence. Intelligence suggested that the Concorde was assembling a third fleet large enough to overwhelm any defense. The final battle was coming and humanity would face it alone. The Concord Council voted to authorize Operation Final Peace, which would commit half their total fleet to destroying Earth. Over 200 ships would attack simultaneously from multiple directions. No human defense could survive such an assault, but the political cost of failure had become too high to accept. Dr. Cooper intercepted the battle plans and felt his heart sink as he read the details. 200 Concord ships against maybe 20 human vessels that could still fight effectively? The mathematics were impossible, but humans had made the impossible possible twice already. Perhaps they could do it one more time. Turner studied the enemy battle plans and began preparing humanity's final gambit. If Earth was going to die, then it would take as many aliens with it as possible. He activated protocols that would turn every human settlement into a weapons platform and every citizen into a soldier. The third Concord fleet began its approach to the solar system with grim determination. There would be no negotiation and no mercy. Humanity had proven too dangerous to be allowed to survive. The species that refused to accept protection would learn the price of defying galactic peace. President Martinez made her final address to the world from deep underground bunkers that might survive nuclear bombardment. Earth faced extinction, but humanity would die free rather than live as slaves. The choice had been made, and now everyone would live or die with the consequences. The greatest battle in human history was about to begin, and both sides knew that only one species would see the dawn. The third Concord fleet filled space around Earth like a metal storm. 200 ships arranged in perfect formation according to tactical doctrine refined over 3 millennia. Supreme Commander Thexanol had brought every available vessel to end the human problem once and forever. The time for half measures was over. Admiral Stone watched the approaching fleet from the bridge of the rebuilt USS Defiance and felt the weight of humanity's future pressing down on her shoulders. 23 human ships faced odds that made victory seem impossible, but humans had never been good at accepting the impossible. She opened communications to every ship in the fleet and spoke the words that would echo through history. The battle began with humanity's last desperate gambit. Every nuclear weapon on Earth launched simultaneously toward the alien fleet. Thousands of missiles carrying fusion warheads streaked through space like angry stars. The Concorde had shields that could stop energy weapons, but solid matter moving at tremendous speeds was harder to deflect. Vexanol watched the missile swarm approach and ordered his ships to disperse. The formation that looked so impressive moments before scattered as captains tried to avoid the nuclear barrage. Some succeeded, but many did not. Fusion explosions turned space white-hot as dozens of alien vessels vanished in balls of nuclear fire. Stone led the human fleet through the chaos of the nuclear bombardment zone. Her ships had been hardened against radiation and electromagnetic interference in ways that alien vessels were not. The humans struck like wolves among sheep, cutting down confused Concorde ships that could not see or communicate effectively. The tide of battle turned when human desperation met alien confusion. In the wreckage between Mars and Jupiter, Concorde ships that had never faced serious resistance found themselves fighting an enemy that would not retreat or surrender. Human crews rammed alien vessels when their weapons failed and fought with bare hands when their ships were boarded. Turner coordinated the defense from his crippled cruiser as alien plasma beams turned his ship into a floating ruin. He continued giving orders even as hull breaches vented atmosphere and gravity failed throughout the vessel. His tactical genius had kept the human fleet alive longer than anyone thought possible, but miracles had their limits. The breakthrough came when Dr. Cooper discovered a weakness in Concorde fleet coordination. Their ships used quantum entanglement for instant communication, but the system could be disrupted by precisely timed electromagnetic pulses. Cooper transmitted the information to Turner, who immediately began implementing a new strategy. Human ships began targeting alien communication nodes with focused attacks that severed quantum links between vessels. Concorde formations that moved like single organisms suddenly became collections of individual ships operating in isolation. The aliens had superior technology, but humans had learned to make their advantages useless. Exondal found his flagship, cut off from the rest of the fleet as human jamming destroyed his communication systems. The Supreme Commander, who had coordinated the movements of 200 ships, was reduced to fighting alone against enemies who seemed to be everywhere at once. His perfect battle plan dissolved into chaos and fear. The final phase of the battle lasted 6 hours and destroyed both fleets almost completely. Human ships that should have been vaporized in the first minutes continued fighting until their hulls cracked and their crews died at their posts. Alien vessels built to last for centuries became debris fields scattered across millions of miles. Stone was found floating in space 3 days after the battle ended, wearing a damaged pressure suit and carrying a dead communication device. She had been trying to coordinate rescue operations when her ship finally broke apart beneath her. When rescue teams brought her aboard the hospital ship, she asked only one question about casualties. The butcher's bill was almost too terrible to calculate. Humanity had lost 90% of its space fleet and over 50,000 trained personnel. The Concorde had lost half their total military strength and suffered casualties that would take generations to replace. Both sides had bled themselves white in a war that nobody could truly win. The aftermath brought unexpected consequences that neither side had anticipated. Concorde member species that had watched the battles from afar began questioning why so. Much blood had been spilled to force unwilling humans into their peaceful alliance. Some worlds quietly began developing defensive capabilities of their own. President Martinez stood in the ruins of the Geneva Peace Talks building and addressed representatives from both sides. Earth was willing to negotiate, but only as equals. Humanity would never accept protectorate status or alien oversight of human affairs. The war could continue, but both civilizations might not survive it. Zethkara led the alien delegation with deep sadness in his ancient eyes. The aquatic being had lost friends and colleagues in the battles while gaining nothing but graves and grief. He no longer believed that forced peace was better than chosen war. Some species could not be saved from themselves, and perhaps that was their right. The negotiations lasted 6 months and produced the Sol Accords, which established humanity as an independent power with full sovereignty over their claimed territory. Earth would not join the Concorde but would respect their borders and refrain from attacking their member species. Trade and cultural exchange would be permitted, but not required. Dr. Cooper served as chief translator during the talks and marveled at how much both sides had learned about each other. The aliens had discovered that some species valued freedom more than safety. Humans had learned that most aliens were not conquerors but gardeners who genuinely wanted to help younger civilizations. Admiral Stone was appointed to command the new Earth Defense Force and given resources to rebuild humanity's space fleet. The ships that emerged from human yards bore little resemblance to the elegant Concorde vessels, but they were built by people who understood that freedom sometimes required the willingness to fight for it. The first human colony ships launched toward distant stars 5 years after the war ended. They carried settlers who had volunteered to face unknown dangers rather than accept guaranteed safety. The galaxy watched nervously as humans began their expansion into interstellar space. Captain Morrison commanded one of the colony expeditions and often thought about his first meeting with the aliens so many years before. The Concorde had offered humanity protection from the dangers of space. Instead, humans had chosen to face those dangers themselves and prove that some gifts came at too high a price. The memorial to the fallen was built on Luna, where it could be seen from Earth with the naked eye. 50,000 names were carved in black stone, along with a simple inscription that captured the human spirit. They died free rather than live as slaves. Their sacrifice ensured that future generations would have the same choice. Turner taught tactics at the new Space Force Academy and tried to prepare young officers for threats that had not yet emerged. He emphasized that superior technology meant nothing without the will to use it effectively. Wars were won by people who refused to quit rather than those who possessed the best equipment. The Concorde slowly adapted to a galaxy where they were no longer the only major power. Some member species requested permission to develop their own defensive capabilities while others began trading directly with human colonies. The age of unquestioned alien hegemony was ending. Years passed, and both sides learned to coexist in an uneasy peace that was built on mutual respect rather than submission. Human ships explored new star systems while Concord vessels maintained order in their traditional territories. The galaxy was large enough for different approaches to civilization. Stone lived to see the first human-built starship capable of intergalactic travel, but died peacefully in her sleep before it launched. Her final words were recorded by her aide and later inscribed on every human warship. Freedom is not free, but slavery costs more than most people can afford to pay. The galaxy would never be the same after humanity emerged from their small solar system to claim their place among the stars. They brought with them ideas about independence and self-determination that spread like wildfire among species that had forgotten such concepts were possible. Some aliens still spoke of the war with regret and wondered if peaceful integration might have been possible with more patience and understanding. Others pointed out that true allies could only be found among those who chose friendship freely rather than accepted it under duress. The humans continued their expansion into space, carrying with them the knowledge that freedom was worth any price and some principles could not be compromised. They had faced extinction rather than surrender their independence, and that choice had changed the course of galactic history. In the end, both species learned valuable lessons about the nature of peace and the price of freedom. The galaxy became a larger and more diverse place where different approaches to civilization could coexist. The age of enforced harmony was over, and the age of chosen cooperation had begun.